to open the debate.
When we're on the way on Starbucks, walking next to homeless people to actually buy just a $5 coffee, we strongly believe it is morally very irresponsible to actually not give that money to the homeless people who are on the sidewalk rather than buying the Starbucks. Therefore, we strongly believe that the wealthy people have the moral responsibility to alleviate the poverty, and the donation is an effective and necessary way to alleviate poverty. We have 4 clarifications before we begin with our arguments. First clarification. Donating is not only meaning just arbitrarily giving money. It is also meaning to make an action or movement, such as the fair trade movement, where we are actually seeing movements who are alleviating the poverty by actually structurally seeing the agricultural exploitation of money, for example. Or we can actually have trainee employments, for example, to provide them employment and give them the chance to actually thrive in the society. We can also say that reintegration is also a part of it. Second of all, we are saying that basic needs is differing by each individual person. For example, in Germany, a basic need is, for example, beer. But we can also say that education, accommodation, and medical resources are also an essential basic need for everyone. Thank you, ma'am. Thirdly, we are happy to support religious and private charities, but more importantly, we are also happy to support charities by the government. Now, fourth clarification, we are not saying that we will legally force other people to actually support those who are in poverty, but we are saying that we should arbitrarily and spontaneously donate, meaning that individuals should have the moral, let's say, potential instinct of actually having this. They want to do it morally because they should do so, or they want to do so. It is something that happens in your mind and is not decided by a third party.
A bit of information. Different people have different basic needs. How do you ascertain what a basic need is?
So we are trying to say there is no such thing as a universal basic needs standard line. We are saying that it differs by each individual country, but education and medical resources, for example, are a good example of a basic need as a human being. Okay, let me move on to my 4 points. We have 4 points for today. The first point is that the birth lottery is creating a societal unjust structure. Second of all, we would like to explain why wealthy are morally responsible of helping those in poverty. Thirdly, we would like to stress that charity is a holistic approach of actually alleviating poverty. And fourthly, that materialism of rich aren't a true happiness. Now let us go on, to the first point. The birth lottery is creating a societal unjust structure. Okay. Your life, or as you can say, your wealth status, is 99% decided by the fate of where you're born, what your DNA is, which country you're born in what family you're born in, and who you are. It is such a thing that you were born in Wales, and for example, the judges as well, you had the English education. And as we can say, the Japanese and, for example, the UK, we had a better life standard compared to others. That is why we are debating for today right now. So we are actually saying that everything is decided upon the fate of where you were born. And this societal unjust structure, is the reason why we actually have to see that those who were the lucky ones in society, who had the adequate, let's say, opportunities to actually thrive in the society, should recognize the responsibility towards poverty. More importantly, we are saying that this is going to be a vicious cycle, because those who had actually opportunity, even if they were poor and succeeded, it means that those actually are continuously then opening up a threshold to those who are in the higher class or in the middle class. Now let us go on to the second point. Our second point, we would like to explain why wealthier are morally responsible for helping those in poverty. We have 2 points here. First of all, the rich people are in support of the policies that benefit the middle class and those that are rich. For example, the corporative tax. Why tax havens occurred is because they do not want to actually contribute towards those who are in poor. That is why they denied tax, and that is the main reason why they actually denied corporate tax and created a tax haven, so they are not contributive towards those kind of governments. Second of all, for example, there are limited resources resources. It's a balance of, let's say there is $10 or $100 in between my coach and me. Okay, I'm the richer person and I get $70 and he gets $30. It means I took $70 from him and he's just left alone with $30. This can be simultaneously comparatively said as well as to those to the example in Mexico where corn was a limited resource for bioethanol oil, right? As well as
On that point,
no, thank you. As well as wheat, for example. Every resource is limited. It means that when a rich person takes something, it also means the resources are then, on the other side, limited those for the poor. And land, for example, if a rich person buys all the land, they make it only accessible to those who are more in the middle class or the rich rather than those in the poor, because it only benefits them. Here we have proven that the rich people are in support of a structural system that leaves the poor poor. Okay, now let us go into the second analysis. On the third point. No, thank you. While in comparison, the third point is that charity is a more holistic approach. We said we're in support of government charity, but more importantly, two analyses here. First, the government only looks at their own interests, including those, for example, lobbied by other big companies. For example, London Olympics or Cape Town Olympics, here or even in the Brazil Olympics. They're trying to alleviate poverty that only interests them in the best way to actually proceed with their Olympics, right? This kind of system is an unfair system because they're not actually targeting all kinds of poverty. They're only looking, for example, at the working poor, but not looking at the absolute poor. This kind of discrimination by the government is not appreciated. Why is that in comparison, charity is much more effective? Charity means that you individual people have a different view of what you should believe, what you believe is morally good, right? So it means that, for example, if I'm a woman and I fight against domestic violence, I pay for the charity for domestic violence, which the government doesn't do. No, thank you. It means that overall, the variety of depending on each individual person, the variety of charity and helping and alleviating poverty is much more holistic rather compared to the government taxation system. Now, let me go on to the second point.
To clarify your model, how exactly do you plan on alleviating poverty?
We're alleviating poverty. We're not saying that we're alleviating poverty by a new policy. We're just proceeding with the current status quo, but are saying it is a more holistic and a more accurate approach towards poverty. Now, let us go on to a fourth point. Additionally, the third point was when there is a real demand, we can tackle that real demand because we know that we want to help that person, and we know in case if we're situated in that situation, you want to be helped. For example, you might not be poor right now, but you do not never know when you're going to be poor, right? So if you help the poor, and the next day you become poor, and you get helped as being a poor, do you think it is good? Yes, this is what moral responsibility is. When you right now said yes to it, you actually confirm that you are on the proposition side. It is morally good and okay to actually support our side. Let's go on to the fourth point, the last point. Materialism of which isn't true happiness. It is just a short-term benefit. For example, if I like to have a Lamborghini, a Bugatti, that is something that the society says is something good. When I like diamonds, it is something that the society says it is good. But if it's not shiny enough, I want to make more and I want to have more, right? And this is something that is subjective happiness. Well, in comparison, if you help someone from your heart, and if I smile to you and you smile back to me, it comes from my heart. It is something that is objective, and it can last for longer. This is something that cannot be very easily measured, but we know in our hearts that is something that remains in our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Tempe, for your speech. I'd now like to call Amali to her speech.
Every Friday, the Samaritans in the United States receive a small donation from a single individual. That donation comes from a man who lost his 14-year-old son to crippling mental illness. The money he gave was once part of his son's weekly allowance. Ladies and gentlemen, this man does nothing at all to alleviate poverty. He fails the tests set out by Team Japan. But on Team Roots, we are here to tell you what we all already know. That man is a good man. And that man is a reasonable man. And that man is someone we won't judge for his actions. Let us be clear what we stand for in this debate. It is not good enough for Team Japan to come up here and say that donating my wealth to poverty alleviation can sometimes be good. What Team Japan has to say and tell us in this debate is why a moral obligation to the poor and only to the poor exists. That is to say, if someone doesn't donate all of his wealth to poverty alleviation, they are morally deficient and we have failed as people and we should judge them and scorn them for their actions. What we're going to prove to you on Team Rose in contrast is 4 substantive arguments. Firstly, I'm going to talk to you about why people deserve some reward and more importantly, some control over the things that they have earned. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about why people can have other obligations which matter more than the obligation to the poor. Thirdly, I'm going to talk to you why Team Japan's model, if passed, is a gamble that cannot constitute moral obligations. And lastly, my second speaker is going to talk to you about why Team Japan's model will lead to more widespread poverty and suffering. But before that, 2 points of attention. Firstly, let's take a look at their motto, and secondly, let's take a look at their principles. So firstly, let's take a look at their motto. Panel, they talk to us about basic needs. They said for German people, a basic need would probably be a beer. Precisely. Different people have different basic needs. Different people have different definitions as to what a basic need is. For people in Saudi Arabia, a car is a basic need, or even a sports car is a basic need. We say it's not good enough for you to tell us that there's no universal basic need, because ultimately, people's variations can exist. And if you're going to accommodate every single variation of what you think that basic need is, you're going to bankrupt the entire global financial system, because it's too expensive to accommodate what people think that basic need is. But more importantly, we say that they told us that they're going to support charities, right? Panel, recognize that they've yet to tell you how exactly they plan to alleviate the plight of the global poor. They told you charities in their mechanism. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we think that charities are much better at catering to the whims of the Western donors than they are at alleviating poverty. Many charities in the world are so hopelessly inefficient that money given to them is like money thrown down the drain. Worse, huge amounts of money is siphoned off by corrupt officials, meaning that much of Western altruism is merely lining the pockets of criminals in the developing world. Why does this matter? It matters because we do not think a small or insignificant or inefficient gain can possibly justify the enormous obligations and burdens that they are placing on every man, women, and child in this world. Unless they give you a watertight mechanism for solving the plight of the global poor, they simply cannot win this debate. Because ultimately, all of their principles rest upon creating a working model that can act as a successful conduit in distributing wealth to the poor. Insofar that they fail to do that, we don't think the principles can stand. Now let's talk about the principles. We heard the birth lottery, that your fate decided based on where you're born. This is a very bizarre understanding of how the real world works, ladies and gentlemen, because not all African Americans earn the same amount of money despite being born with similar conditions at birth. We say that different African Americans will earn more money and those that earn less money. According to their logic, all of them will earn the same amount of money, whole answer, but we think there are different spectrums of individuals because ultimately, some part of your wealth is based on your hard work and your actions. So you cannot simply take away all their money by saying it's up to the birth lottery. Before I go on, tell me why isn't it the case? Okay. They didn't tell us that the rich continue to enrich themselves. We don't think so because the rich sell to people who can pay. We live in a capitalistic society. The rich sell to people who can pay for the flat, for instance. We think they are profit motivated. We don't think they continue to enrich themselves. We don't buy that trend. So let's now move on to my first substantive argument on why people deserve some reward and more importantly, some control over the things that they have earned. Panel, we put to you that individuals have a right to a reward from a product of their labor, and we suggest that kind of reward should come in the form of retaining their wealth. Now let me explain to you how individuals earn the wealth that they own and therefore have a right to control it. Before I move on, any points of information?
Yes.
Yes.
So even if you own a Lamborghini, you think that 5 cents, even a penny, for a homeless person who is suffering and starving is morally, it's okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. The problem with that is that only a very small minority of people have Lamborghinis. The vast majority of the people in this debate are the middle class. People who are still stranded with debt. You are forcing every single one of them to give up all of their money, and we say that's wrong because we cannot punish them for just because you think that people have Lamborghinis. We don't think the middle class should be punished because of your actions. So we say that it is true that some people attain wealth out of luck due to the school they go to or the color of their skin. That is to say that they did not work for it or earn it. But it is more true that most people attain wealth due to the choices that they have made, the labor that they've invested, and the sacrifices they've endured up till this point. For instance, when you choose to save up and deny yourself luxuries in the past, or when you decide to work on weekends or overtime and give up an hour of leisure for an hour of work. In other words, the money an individual earns is the sum of his choices. The money you earn, panel, is an extension of who you are, an extension of your bodily and intellectual autonomy. So what does this mean in practice? It means that your wealth is something which you deserve, something you own, and something which you have a right to control over. That is not to say, no thank you, this right is an absolute. Obviously, in some situations, the government can remove some of your wealth through taxation, for instance, but the idea that individuals have no right to this wealth whatsoever, that they have an obligation to give it up all the way completely, tramples upon all their rights, and we abhor that. Now onto my second substantive argument on why people can have other obligations which matter more than the obligation to the poor. We say that even if we have small commitments to every single person in the world, like King Japan thinks, we say that some obligations are special, that some commitments are unique, that not all obligations are equal, and people should have the right to prioritize those who are closer to them over those who they may well never meet. Before I move on, any points of information? Yes?
So rich makes poverty by taking a large amount of limited resources, as I told you. How do you think about that?
We think people who have money now worked for it. If a rich person has money now, it's because he worked for it through legal means. If you suspect that he has committed a crime in taking money from the poor, we think that we prosecute under the current court to begin with. We don't buy that notion. Let me give you an example on my point, for instance, as to why obligations are special and different. If a mother sees a child and another child both trapped in a burning car, we think that mother will be justified in saving her own child first, because we recognize that even though the mother has moral obligations towards the other child, the mother has greater moral obligations towards her own. What we can see from this is that communities choose to care for their own before they care about others, and we think that they are legitimate in doing so. On Timos, we believe that you have the right to care for your friends or family, as opposed to Team Japan that thinks that if you spend money caring for your family or friends, because that isn't poverty alleviation, you are morally deficient. If I have a right to care about what happens to my brother, and if I have a right to care about what happens to a friend I grew up with, then why do I not have a right to care about myself? If we accept that some people are more important to me than others, then why should I myself not fall into this category? Finally, we say that on my final substantive, recognized panel, that a moral obligation can only exist insofar that an individual's intervention would definitively improve the situation. That is to say, create a net benefit. We say sometimes, by intervening, I run the risk of causing even more harm. We use the example of how in the Ethiopian famine of the 1980s, people from every corner of the globe flew sacks of grains to the people of Addis Ababa. That meant that grain in Ethiopia cost next to nothing, which resulted in farmers not growing grain, causing more harm by making the famine worse. So my intention to send a bag of grain to Ethiopia sounds good, but it only made the famine worse, in spite of my best intentions. We don't think the global poor deserve to suffer because of the whims of Western privilege. To conclude my speech, Team Japan wants to condemn people for not taking an action. But if those people have an honest belief that their action can make the situation worse, or they have a genuine concern that the result is uncertain, then we think they have the right to retain control over their wealth, and for all these reasons, we're very proud to oppose.
Thank you, Sean, for your speech. I'd now like to call Council Advocates.
Two things that team opposition misunderstand in this debate. Number one, so they're saying like, okay, so you aren't going to be able to help your friend or like your children is going to die because you're going to donate your money to the poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, this debate is not like that. As our first speaker have clearly clarified, we believe basic needs is allowed or legitimate for the individual to be chosen. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this debate is about the moral judgment as an individual, not as a policy, those sort of things. The misunderstanding number 2 is that they're going to make this debate as same as other kind of policy debate. No, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a sort of policy debate. We are not going to put on legal responsibility of an individual. This is the debate which is going to be done inside of the individual. When you go to the Starbucks, the question is whether you should pay that money for the person who is suffering in the sidewalk, or are you going to buy that Starbucks? Ladies and gentlemen, because of this 2 misunderstanding coming from the opposition side, we think they have to explain more why the individual's moral judgment, why they do not have more responsibility to help poor. No, thank you, sir. In my speech, I'm going to tell you more about why it is morally unjust for them to just pursue their own preference or own benefit in the very beginning. But before that, many pieces of rebuttal. So firstly, before that, yes.
Even if a moral obligation exists, why can't it be in terms of other forms such as donating to rape crisis or other forms of altruism?
Sorry, can you repeat one more time?
Even if a moral obligation exists, why can't it be in terms of other forms of altruism such as donating to rape crisis?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, because we think in this debate, so if that individual wants to donate more by sacrificing yourself, we think it's legitimate for the individual to choose in that kind of way, because we are saying that after you met that basic needs, you have more responsibility to donate to this charity or other kind of way in order to alleviate the poverty. So we think the debate should be in that kind of way, and we are not going to talk about the cases that individuals are going to be forced to sacrifice themselves. Now, let's look at the argument coming from their side. No, firstly, let me deal with the rebuttal coming from their side, house. So, firstly, they talk about on why it is like moral responsibility. So I'm going to mainly talk about this point in my class point. Then they said, okay, so like individuals have different basic needs, and that's why it is difficult, or that's why like our model is not so complicated. But we don't think so, right? Because we think this is a moral judgment debate. So if the individual truly thinks you need a Lamborghini in order to live, or if the individual says, I will commit suicide without a Lamborghini, I think it is allowed for the individual to choose to have such kind of luxury. But we don't think that in most of the cases that individual truly thinks that they need that, or without that they are going to commit suicide. That's why we think that individuals are able to judge what is truly necessary for them, and that's why we are saying this debate should be the moral judgment debate about the individual. That's why we have to assume that individuals are able to judge what is the basic need for the individual. That's why we can say this is not a policy debate, because it is so difficult for the government to just judge that. More than that is not a debate.
Point of information.
No, thank you, sir. Now, let's look at the argument coming from their side, the house. Okay, about the birth lottery stuff. So we have told you, birth lottery is extremely unfair, and they talked about the example of African American people. We're not saying all of the African American people are in the same situation, because, well, they may say because individuals have made some kind of effort. We concede that they have made some sort of effort, but whether they could have effort or not also is responsible for the birth lottery that they were in. For example, if you do not have both of your hands, it is more difficult for you to study, right? That's why we can say all of that stuff, that whether you could make an effort or not is also responsible for the birth lottery. That's why we are not saying all of the people are going to be same just because the race is same, but the condition may be same. More than that, like how they are going to react is basically defined by the birth lottery that they say. That's why we can say the analysis coming from the opposite side is quite different. Nextly, they talked about, okay, so individuals have a right to decide how to use their property.
On
Yes.
that point, sir.
No, thank you, madam. That's each individual have a right to do that. Okay, so if we concede this point is true, meaning in opposition world, they're going to justify not to pay tax at all, right? So if they say individuals have a right to utilize your money as much as possible because you made an effort, no, thank you, madam. Meaning the opposition is going to deny the progressive tax, for example, those kind of things, right? Because if you make less effort, you have to if you make less effort and earn less money, the obligation for the government, obligation of the tax is going to be lower than the one who made more effort. Meaning, on their side of opposition, they're going to deny whole of the tax system, those kind of things, and we think that kind of rule is going to be really, really terrible, because the person who accidentally got a bad lottery, meaning the situation that they cannot make any kind of effort, are going to live in a really harsh situation, but no kind of social security is waiting for them. We think that kind of situation is extremely terrible. Yes, ma'am.
If the amount of wealth you earn over your lifetime is wholly determined by your birth, then why don't all victims of structural oppression end up in poverty?
Sorry, can I repeat one more time?
So if the amount of wealth you earn over your lifetime is wholly determined by the birth lottery, like you say, then why don't all individuals of structural oppression, like African Americans, end up in poverty?
Because in some kind of cases, you might benefit by your birth lottery, right? For example, if you were born in a really rich house, we think you are going to be able to have an access to more education, those sort of things. That's why we can say birth lottery is basically. So we think where you're born is one of the most important issue, or one of the most important reason or the most important point. That's to decides what kind of life that you are going to live in. That's why we think birth lottery is something the more important. More than that, what we have to recognize here is that actually some kind of fate may be able to be defeated by making some sort of effort, but the point here is some individual cannot oppress such kind of birth lottery in the very beginning. If you do not have your hands, or if you are mentally disabled, it naturally means you cannot make any kind of effort in the very beginning, right? That's why we can say it is for some individual, the amount of the effort that they have to make in order to endure the normal quality of life that they are saying is really difficult. That's why we can say this birth lottery argument is extremely, this birth lottery itself is extremely illegitimate. Now, let's look at the point that why it is extremely unjust for the individual to just pursue their own benefit. So, what our first speaker have told you is that the amount of the resource existing in the world is limited. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, if rich people have more access to the resources, it means someone is sacrificed out there. More than that, ladies and gentlemen, what our first speaker have also told you is that the privileged people, for example, a person who have more money, politically try to oppress the tax system with those kind of things. That's why they try to oppose the progressive tax and try to encourage more in consumption tax. And ladies and gentlemen, because the privileged people try to make the structure to benefit themselves, more and more poor people is actually sacrificed in that sphere. And we think this is extremely unjust because they were just lucky by the birth lottery. And ladies and gentlemen, we think the individual have a more responsibility to save one if you are not in the situation of risking your life. For example, if a boy is drowning in the lake, and if you can't save him without risking your life, we think it is naturally more responsibility, or you should save that children if you're not going to risk your life in the very beginning. More than that, ladies and gentlemen, what we are saying here is that because you kicked that boy into the lake, and that's why boy is drowning now, we say you have more responsibility to save that boy. Because we say being rich always means that someone is sacrificing behind you. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, because the rich people or wealthier people is more responsible for the poor, and because you can save that individual without risking yourself, that's why I'm really proud to propose.
Thank you, Taco, for your speech. I'd now like to call Ellen to give her speech.
Prior to the 2010 earthquake, Haiti's main crisis was poverty. There were 12,000 poverty alleviation charities on the ground. More charities per person than anywhere else in the world, and massive amounts of poverty aid was sent by developed countries. And you would expect that all of that money and effort would mean that poverty was massively reduced in Haiti. But that was not the case, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, during that period, incomes in Haiti dropped by more than a third, plunging even more people into poverty. In this case, we believe there is no moral obligation to donate your wealth to poverty alleviation, because not only is the wealth that you're donating not alleviating poverty, it is actually making it worse. And unless Team Japan can prove today there is a significant reduction in poverty, it is not worth the massive burden placed on everyone else, in society. I'm going to go on to talk a bit in a minute about why this motion will lead to more poverty and suffering. But first, I'd like to discuss what we were brought. 2 questions in rebuttal. Firstly, is there a moral obligation? And secondly, what are the practical consequences of this motion?
Point of information.
No, thank you. So, we've been told by the proposition, we've been conceded by the proposition that people can have other obligations. As we pointed out in our second argument, we'd like to remind the proposition of the wording of the motion is that after meeting your basic needs, you donate your wealth to poverty alleviation. You donate all of your wealth to poverty alleviation. At that point, what they have to prove is that the only obligation that exists is to poverty alleviation, and there are no other obligations existing. Proposition also tried to claim that your fate is determined by your birth circumstances, and therefore all money should be donated. So we pointed out to you that some part of this wealth was actually earned through hard work and sacrifices, and this was our entire first argument, and this was conceded by the proposition. In that case, why do these people have a responsibility to donate all of their wealth to poverty alleviation, while at least part of their wealth was earned by their own hard work? We're also told that the wealthy are often responsible. First response, the wealthy that we're talking about here are a minority within this debate. You need to talk about the middle class people, the 82% of Americans who live above the poverty line, but are still riddled with debt. No, thank you. These are the people we need to be talking about within this debate because these are the majority and we've had nothing from Team Japan about them so far. Second response, if exploitation occurs, we would take legal actions against them. We're happy to support that. No, thank you. We're also told that materialistic things don't bring happiness. We don't think it's up to Team Japan to dictate to people what should make them happy. People have a right to choose what makes them happy. If that is materialistic things, then they should be allowed to choose that. We're also told they would allow people to say that a Lamborghini is a basic need. They also focused on the responsibility of the super rich people about how selfish they were. If they were so selfish, tell us why they wouldn't then say, oh, but a Lamborghini is a basic need. A basic need is to have several million in my bank account, and therefore I'm not going to donate any wealth. Therefore there is no change under this motion to the people that Team Japan are so eager to talk about. We think unless they can prove that poverty will be alleviated, there is no moral responsibility. Secondly, what are the practical consequences? Like, we think this doesn't work, and unless they can prove that to us, this motion will not actually help to alleviate poverty. We also told you about other causes, right, that are really important, and they told us we can also support them. But at the point at which your only moral responsibility is to donate all of your wealth to poverty alleviation, no thank you, you'd have no wealth left to donate to any other causes like rape crisis, like environmental causes, like politics. We think these other causes are really important. We were also told that privileged people have policies that support them. We're quite happy to change these policies. We're quite happy to support more democracy within these countries. We think that there are other ways to solve that problem. So moving on. My arguments. Why this motion leads to more poverty and suffering. 3 subpoints. Firstly, why this money often doesn't actually alleviate poverty. Secondly, I'm going to talk about why the entertainment service and luxury goods industry collapse because there's no consumer demand and why that's bad. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about why there's less innovation. But before I do that, I'll take more information.
Even if you're, for example, wounded, but I am trying to help you, but the wound still remains, don't you think it is morally good that I actually helped you?
Let's look at that analogy, right? We think the analogy only applies if the person that is helping you is also wounded. At the point at which, right, you have a moral responsibility to yourself, and you also apparently have a moral responsibility to the other person. When you can't stop the wound, like the blood flowing out of the wound, you can't save that person. You have more of a moral responsibility to look after your own wound as opposed to somebody else's wound. And that is the analogy we're talking about today. So why this money often doesn't actually alleviate poverty? Often the money given to poverty alleviation charities isn't actually spent on poverty alleviation. And I have 3 things that they're often spent on. Firstly, this money is often spent on administration costs and funding foreign aid workers. For example, in Haiti, a lot of poverty alleviation aid before the earthquake, they were given a lot of that, but a whopping 40% of that aid was spent unnecessarily on foreign aid workers, which meant that these foreign aid workers were driving around in $50,000 cars while people were starving to death around them. Secondly, charities get the most money because they are very good at advertising and they're very good at persuading people. However, we don't think that how effective a charity's advertisements are necessarily dictate how good they are at poverty alleviation. We also think this is an incentive for charities to spend lots of money on advertisements. And so instead of going towards poverty alleviation, this money lines the pockets of advertisement companies. Third thing is that in order to operate in in impoverished areas. Charities often either need to pay bribes or their money is stolen from them. So by giving to charity, individuals who think they're doing a good thing are actually funding criminals and corrupt officials. So by this point, there is very little money left to spend on poverty alleviation, and that's assuming that these attempts to alleviate poverty actually work in the first place. And before I go on to that, I'll take a point of information.
You say that every charity is a bad thing, and you say that no one should donate their money to poverty alleviation.
What we're saying is that saying that there is a moral responsibility for people to donate money to charities that have been proven not to work, to charities that have been proven to be corrupt, to steal money and to give them to criminals and corrupt officials, we think that's bad. And as I'm going to go on to elaborate, this money often doesn't actually make a difference, or it makes it worse. We gave you the example of Ethiopia, where well-intentioned Westerners sent bags of grain during a famine, but actually made the famine worse because the price of grain fell so low that farmers couldn't afford to grow it anymore. We also gave the example of Haiti, where wages dropped by a third, despite all of the poverty aid going into that country. So because we think that poverty alleviation charities don't actually alleviate poverty, this moral obligation effectively does not exist. Secondly, the entertainment, service and luxury goods industries collapse because there is no consumer demand, because everybody's giving their money to poverty alleviation and is not spending it within these industries. Two reasons why that's bad. 80% of the US population work in the service industry alone, and that's not talking about luxury goods and entertainment. All of these people lose their jobs under this motion. There's high unemployment and more people in poverty. Secondly, these companies are prevented from expanding in the future, which is especially bad for developing countries that often need these jobs. Thirdly, less innovation occurs, because innovation only occurs if there is consumer demand. And examples such as online shopping and vacuums and dishwashers were only created luxury goods, but over time became something that is essential for people. So all of these innovations would never have occurred under this motion because they were originally considered luxury goods and there would have been no demand for them. But they're really important within today's society. A single mother might need the online shopping to get food for her family because she's working so many jobs to provide for them and has no time to shop for this food on her own. We think that's really, really important that she has these, and this wouldn't happen. So because we think that poverty alleviation charities don't actually work and actually cause more poverty, we're proud to oppose.
Thank you, Ellen, for your speech. I'd now like to propose our voice.
This debate is not about, it's not that we will force individuals to donate all the money they have to alleviate poverty. Rather, this debate, so we will not restrict people who do not donate, or we will not punish people who do not donate to poverty alleviation. But we are talking that the immoral should donate their money to poverty alleviation. Team opposition today are talking that every charity is a bad thing and no one should donate their money to poverty alleviation and no one should do anything. They have to ignore, they have to overlook the situation. And because we believe that is not something that is a morally good and morally just thing, that is why we Team Japan is standing here today. So in my speech, I'd like to clarify two things. Firstly, about whether or not the rich are rich because they got effort, or it is birth lottery as we've been consistently presented. And after that, I'd like to clarify that donation is something effective and donation is something important. And even if
they framed that this debate is all about consequence. No, ladies and gentlemen, consequence is important. Rather, we have to keep in mind that this debate is in morality. They should donate as a moral choice. They should donate their money, or they should buy a Starbucks coffee. Thank you. So firstly, about a reward or birth lottery. So they consistently see if they in opposition first, they told us that it should be a reward for rich people or even for middle class people because it is their choice, because they made their efforts, ladies and gentlemen. But we say that it is a birth lottery that enabled their choice, enabled their efforts, ladies and gentlemen. And they said that, well, what we have to prove to you is that, well, that those people have to donate all the money they have to poverty alleviation. We say that we believe they should donate as a moral choice, but we do not punish them. We do not say that we will restrict. We will legally, they do have a legal response to donate money, or to donate all the money they have. But as a moral choice, we believe that they should donate the money to poverty alleviation. Yes.
Can you tell me why different African Americans earn different amount of money till today?
Sorry?
Can you tell me why different African Americans earn different incomes till today?
Because ladies and gentlemen, we are not talking about ethnic, but rather we are talking about, we've already told you that there are many aspects, country, like we both born in Wales and Japan, that is why we got a good education, but not only ethnic, not only country, but also family situation, because probably that parents were rich, we could go to university, we could go to cram school. Not only that, we have a lot of friends who may be rich. That is not something about, it's not only about ethnic, rather we're talking about friends, we're talking about country, we are talking about family, financial situation, we're talking about a whole environmental itself. And that is something that is decided by birth lottery. And we do not we do not deny that there might be an effort, but that is environmental condition that enabled those kind of efforts, and they never proved that they just saying that it is all about effort, and that's why they should reward. No, ladies and gentlemen, and they didn't never engage our point that there are only limited resources because rich people take limited resources. Rich people make poverty, and poverty people cannot be rich. That is the social structure under status quo, and that is the social structure that suffering the poor. No, thank you. So they have to prove to us that there is no environmental, there is no environmental condition, and there is no moral obligation for the rich. And now let's move into. No, thank you. So let's move into charity thing. This is about the charity. They consistently say they just keep on saying that charity is a bad thing and charity is inefficient. That's why we should not donate poverty. Well, we do not think so. So two analyses. One, they only saying that because charity is not a thing, because charity has failed in Ethiopia or in other countries, we should not donate. But we are saying that if we take the policy, everyone should, we say everyone in morals should donate their money. And who they decide where to donate their money? It is individual that will decide where to donate their money. And individual can decide which donation, which charity organization is effective and how they can solve poverty. And that is a moral choice, and that is a rational choice that they have to make. Yes.
You told us at the start of your speech that this debate is not about consequences. But when your principles are contingent on the consequences being good, this debate has to be about the consequences.
Well, we are saying that even if, in the first place, we do not believe that it's not all about consequence, because it is a moral decision. But even if we consider the case, it is, we Team Japan studies on better side, because we say that charity is something effective. So as I told you, because individual can decide where to where to donate their money, because individual can decide how to can support donation. And as we told you, it's not about charity is not about giving. It's not only about giving money. We do education. We do support them to get jobs, and we do properly provide them with food. Those are things that poverty alleviation, and we are sure that because even charity organizations want to collect their money, they will do properly, and they will do all the things they can to alleviate poverty. And another thing, so as we told you in the first place, now poverty alleviation is not working so good because government is not efficient. We do not say that government is an evil, but we do support taxation, we do support retribution by government. But rather, we say that because charity is something that we can do holistically. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you feel bad about somebody who is sleeping in the street, or probably you feel bad about somebody who cannot go to school. Because you think that because the moral decision is different from people to people, it is good to decide by yourself where to donate, and that is good social structure because you can solve the problem. You can donate to the poverty alleviation which you really want to solve, which you really want to help. And because charity is holistic, because they can cooperate with each organization, that is something good. So, in conclusion, we're saying that as a moral decision, they should not buy Starbucks coffee, or they should not buy luxury goods. Rather, we do think that they should, as a moral choice, donate their money. And even if we concede their case, even if it's all about consequence, we believe that it is better to donate their money to poverty alleviation rather than doing nothing, as Team Wales is presenting. We like to propose.
Thank you, Greta, for your speech. I'd now like to call Amali to give her speech.
Contrary to what Team Japan brought to you within the first 10 seconds of their third speaker's speech, this debate was about donating all of your money to poverty alleviation. This debate was not about an individual choosing to buy a Starbucks coffee over donating 8 cents to help the person sitting outside on the pavement. It was not about individuals who will commit suicide if they won't get Lamborghinis. This debate was about forcing the 82% of your debt-ridden middle class to donate all of their money to poverty alleviation. For their arguments to stand, they need to not only show us how they will effectively alleviate poverty and hence be able to justify imposing this huge moral obligation on 82% of your people, but they also have to show to us how every single one of these 82% are responsible for the oppression of the others living within your country. And that's why their case does not stand. No, thank you. 3 issues today. Number 1, two issues. Individuals will have a right to utilize their money however so they wish. And number 2, how they're making the situation worse. Before we begin, let's address their model. They said this was not a policy debate, and so they don't necessarily need to prove to us how they will be alleviating poverty. The reason why this is so important, ladies and gentlemen, is because in order for there to be such a big moral obligation imposed on all of your people, they need to show to us how this poverty will be alleviated. And they hence need to address our examples such as the one my first and second speaker gave you, of countries like Ethiopia, of the famine that took place in Addis Ababa, examples they have still not tackled. But let's still deal with their argument about moral obligations. They said this moral obligation exists for a variety of reasons. And they never tackled our response to this. In fact, they never tackled our entire first line of argument. We told you that individuals have a right to property, that your wealth is the product of the sum of your choices, decisions, and labor. We told you it is hence an extension of your bodily and intellectual autonomy, and this is something your state cannot take away from you and does not take away from you in other cases. On a second level, we told you how some obligations are more special than other obligations, something they once again never really tackled, and so we think they concede to this. They concede that yes, your state has more of a responsibility towards the people living within it and not the people living outside. And so when they concede that some obligations are more special than others, we think that your moral obligation towards your family, towards yourself, and your moral obligation to use the money, the product of your labor on yourself is more important than you alleviating poverty within your country. Our principle still stands, our arguments are unrefuted, and this moral obligation does not stand. But we said no thank you, sir, even if it does exist, right? It only exists insofar as there's a definitive benefit, something they were not once able to refute. And we said even if that is not true, it only stands that they're able to prove to us how all the people are responsible, or all the people who are being forced to give their money are responsible for the things that they pointed out, something once again they were never really able to prove to us. The only thing they did say is how rich people made a structure to benefit themselves. Before I talk about this, I'll take this.
The third party in Haiti and in the US are saying, for example, the media are saying it failed. But the people who were helped by the charity, do they believe it was a good thing? It is the same question as if you're in poverty and someone gives you 100,000 US dollars, do you think it is a good thing, yes or no?
Ladies and gentlemen, someone giving you $1,000 is only good insofar as that $1,000 can be used to alleviate poverty. Please first tackle our numerous examples of how this does not happen. Tackle my second speaker's argument about NGOs and corruption. Tackle all of our case about how this will not alleviate poverty, and then ask us whether that person actually got that money in the end or did not. But they said, so rich people made a structure to benefit themselves and exploit your poor. Once again, we point out, this debate is not just about the 3% of your people. This debate is about your middle class and the 82%. Secondly, we say, don't exploit. We say, we're not really exploiting your poor, right? Because these people consent to these jobs. On a third level, show us how this individual who is supposedly being exploited by your system would have been better off if he had no job, and if we had not provided him with an income, right? And lastly, we said if they're not talking about that case, and they're talking about unfair exploitation, we have laws in place for that, and we feel we can campaign for minimum wage laws in developing countries, and that doesn't really stand. Fifthly, they gave us several examples. They said that this is tantamount to condemning what is happening if you're not alleviating poverty, and they gave us the example of a boy in a lake, right? So for that, we have a few things to say. So we feel you have a responsibility, yes, to save that boy who's drowning in the lake, but that is not what this debate is about. This debate is about you jumping into that lake and then one boy being added per second by a crane. Show us how then you have a moral obligation to save all those people, whether you will even be able to, as an individual, save all of those people, something they have not shown to us. And we feel, secondly, your moral obligation stands first to yourself, something they have not tackled. And yes, we do support taxation. We never said we didn't. We do think progressive taxation is also good because we feel individuals have some responsibility to your state, and this because the state provides you with essential services, and you have a responsibility to continue to ensure these services are being provided to your people. So we don't think that entire attack stands anyway. Second issue, whether or not you're making the situation worse. They said we're going to fix poverty, right? So we think this is essentially not going to happen. We gave you several examples. We told you about NGOs, how money is often spent on administration, and how NGOs, since they are supporting the status quo, which is what their first speaker said in a POI, how the status quo is failing to alleviate poverty because of the fact that these NGOs are corrupt, because of the fact that all of this money is spent on ad campaigns, emotive ad campaigns, and administration costs. Show us how you're going to fix that in order to alleviate poverty. And so you don't think that's happening. Instead, let's show you what is happening, something that's not going to happen in the world of Team Wales, right? Because Wales is prioritizing, no thank you sir, other causes. Wales is saying art is also important. Wales is saying you have no right to judge a person who is choosing to donate his money to cancer research because he lost his son to cancer. You as a government cannot stop him, cannot pass this judgment. We say for a state to successfully come out of economic instability, you need all other systems within your state to function. We don't think spending all of your money on this poverty alleviation and ignoring every single issue in your country is going to allow your state to progress or come out of this. And thirdly, we feel it's morally abhorrent to judge people who do this. And so, for all these reasons, because they had to prove a number of things to us which they were never really able to, because they had to show us how these individuals are morally deficient and should be judged and scorned for not donating all of their money to poverty alleviation, because they had to show us how in order to enforce this moral obligation, poverty definitely has to be alleviated and that consequences are important. Because they had to show us that this was the best way to be a morally good person. Because they had to show us that people don't essentially have a right to prioritize how they utilize the product of their own labor and how property right over your wealth and family obligations do not exist. And because they had to show us, ladies and gentlemen, the moral responsibility generated has to apply to everyone and not just in a majority of cases, we feel we have won this debate. And we feel, ladies and gentlemen, because all of their argument about the birth lottery does not stand, and because the vast part of our case has still gone unrefuted, Team Wales has won this debate today, and we beg you to oppose.
Thank you, Amani, for your speech. It is now my pleasure to ask Sean to give the opposition's replies.
Do you know why I don't have a British accent? Because unlike King Japan, who thinks that Wales is a very good country for an education, I did not come from a country that had a very good education. For me to be before you right here and tell you why we won this debate, my mother had to take on a lot of debt for me to be here. And my mother's the kind of person that King Japan wants to punish today because she's not too rich to have a lot of money, but she's not too poor to benefit from their model, and we abhor it. This debate came down to three clashes. Firstly, what is their burden? Secondly, let's talk about moral obligations. And lastly, let's talk about the consequences of their model. So firstly, let's look at the burden. We told you from the beginning of the debate that they have to defend a model that enforces individuals to donate all their wealth after meeting their basic needs. Why? Because according to their logic, if I donate 20% of my wealth and I can save one child in poverty, if I donate 40% of my wealth and I can save 2 children in poverty, then why do I not have to donate all of my wealth to save more children in poverty? What if my moral obligation only ends with the first child and not the second child or the third child? We have no response. And that's why we told you that for them to stand with their moral obligation, they have to tell us that they have to defend a policy and a motto that have people donate all of their wealth after meeting their basic needs, and we don't think they've adequately responded to that. Secondly, we told you that they have to show us why, even if moral obligation exists, it must take the form of poverty alleviation. Why can't it take the form of supporting rape crisis? Why can't it take the form of other forms of altruism? Because we say that people who are suffering from poverty are also suffering, there are also other people who are suffering from, say, cancer, for instance. They're all suffering to begin with. What makes poverty so qualitatively different from all other kinds of suffering that you must prioritize them at all? But more than we say that, okay, if your model stands and they donate all of their wealth to poverty alleviation, this means that they have no other money to donate to other forms of altruism, so it's on your side of the house that things become worse, and all the social ills and evils that we think we're going to prevent gets worse on your side of the house. But we then told you that you have to stand for a policy that works, and they said, no, we don't have to. Here's why they have to. Because for you to use the moral suffering of the global poor, which is your entire substantive, for you to use that to justify enforcing individuals to donate all of their wealth, you must show us a working model that can successfully facilitate and distribute wealth donations to the poor. So you must show us how you can successfully resolve poverty alleviation, and that's why you can enforce this policy. We say insofar that you cannot, or your principles cannot stand. We don't think they fulfill their burden. We think in the first round, we take this debate. Secondly, let's look at their moral obligations. We started this debate saying that moral obligations exist, or that they started this debate saying that moral obligations exist because of the birth lottery. I then raised a point saying that not all people in structural poverty earn the same income, right? Because ultimately some of the differential in wages is due to your effort. They then consider that, okay, maybe it's part of your effort. We think this defeats your entire principle because if I can prove that some of my wealth is because of my effort, then you have no right to say that my wealth is part of the birth lottery and then take away all of my wealth. We think that's no different from robbery and theft. We reject this. Finally, they said that we told you that moral obligations do not exist. We told you because people worked hard for their wealth. We told you that their wealth empowers them as an individual to do the things they want to do. No response. We say your side of the house tramples over all their rights and we cannot accept that. We then told you that even if obligations exist, it can be expressed in other forms. We didn't hear a response to that. Lastly, we told you that if you cannot definitively alleviate poverty, your side cannot stand. So you the example of the Ethiopian crisis, no response to that, of how you alleviating poverty only serves to worsen poverty, and we reject this. Finally, on consequences, we told you that your model cannot work because they said they want to have everyone get a Lamborghini. I told you why this will bankrupt the global financial system. They said, okay, if someone threatens suicide, we'll give them a Lamborghini. I'm sorry, then everybody would threaten suicide to get a Lamborghini. If you want to fulfill every single basic need, we think ultimately your side of the house is one that's unrealistic and one that's so out of touch with reality, you just serve to worsen poverty and you just serve to exacerbate it. We say you punish the majority of the people that are not too rich to benefit, they have a lot of money, but more importantly, you punish people that are not too poor. Ultimately, you punish every single person that's in the middle class like my mother, and for all these reasons, we're very, very proud to oppose.
Thank you, Sean, for your speech. It is now my pleasure to ask Tekla to finish this debate and give the propositions replies.
Two questions to ask you as the proposition reply. Number one, is people really going to sacrifice themselves as the opposition characterized? Number two, can the poverty be saved under our side of the house? But before that, two things to clarify. Firstly, we have to understand that there were no response from team opposition side that we told you, which is causing the poverty, right? We said the number of resources is limited. For example, case of corn, because some rich people try to use that corn for the fuel, and some poverty person in poverty cannot access to that food. We say this kind of structure is causing the poor to suffer more. There were no clear response from the team opposition, meaning they conceded that some sort of cause of the poor is from rich people. And also, ladies and gentlemen, about the birth lottery argument, they just kept on saying, like, it doesn't necessarily mean all of the African American people earn the same amount of money. No, ladies and gentlemen, we have responded you over twice, right? We have told you, birth lottery is something defines all of you. It's meaning the fate that you are going to spend. And ladies and gentlemen, we say, well, the reason why this is unjust is because the start line is completely different. And this is something that we also have told you. And because this start line is going to limit your capability of earning more money, and because you have less access to the food, we say rich people is structurally oppressing poor. And we say this is completely unjust, and that's why we say you have a fundamental moral responsibility and not enough response from team opposition. Second thing to clarify, so they talked about, like, this debate is about, like, donate all of your money that you have. We never said such kind of things, right? We say that you should do that as a moral judgment as an individual, right? We do not say this is a policy debate to deprive all of the wealth that you have. More than that, they say, okay, so and then where are going to be the borderline? So do I have to save like 3 or like 4 children? So, but at this point, we don't think this can be a direct response to prove that individuals have no responsibility to save one in the very beginning. And we also couldn't really hear that why individuals have no more responsibility to save at least one people in the very beginning. Now, let's look at the questions. So firstly, are people really going to sacrifice themselves? So ladies and gentlemen, the question to the opposition side is that what's the definition of basic needs? They are kept on saying individual is going to sacrifice themselves and suffer, and at the end of the day they are going to commit suicide or such kind of things. ladies and gentlemen, we do not think this is something, it is unfair for the opposition side to say basic needs is something only food or those kind of things and it's not about the mental stability. We say under our side of the house that basic needs for the individual can be defined or legitimate for the individual to define what is the basic needs that you have. That's why we are saying you do not really have to risk yourself in the very beginning. But if you are going to have an access to the Starbucks, we are kept on saying that you should put that money to save the poverty person in the poverty. But let's concede what they are saying is true, that you are going to suffer by doing so. And then the point is, you are also going to be protected by the same structure that we have provided here, right? That's why we are saying if the social structure say you have to donate your money to other kind of people, and then when you are in the structure of the poverty, you can be that character saved by the social structure. And we think this is extremely beneficial for the individual because the worst case scenario coming from their side of the house is not going to stand. Now, second question, whether the poverty is going to be saved. They kept on saying like 40% of the wealth was like wasted and it's really inefficient or those kind of things. Well, in the very beginning, we couldn't really hear any comparison from the opposition side, right? We have told you it is at least better than nothing, right? If there are no money going for Haiti, for example, we think none of the people could be saved because if you want to save someone's life, money is necessary out there. And we again think it's unfair for themselves, their side of the house, to assume all of the charity organization is really like a crime organization, those are the things. More than that, ladies and gentlemen, we have already also told you in the policy that if all of that NGO is so unjust, we are also happy to promote the government's organization, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we can say it is really unfair for their side of the house to assume, on comparison, charity organization is going to harm poverty. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, because we think everyone can be happy under side of the proposition, we think we have to follow our model. That's why I'm really proud to propose.